Passé composé with reflexive verbs. We know we use a passé composé when we want to talk about actions that are completed. We know that we form it by using the present tense of avoir or of être followed by the past participle. So that's two steps. Step one, we conjugate avoir or être in the present tense. Step two, we add the past participle. We know that the past participle of regular ER verbs is formed by removing the ER and replacing it with I accent aigu. We know that we form regular IR verbs, the past participles, by removing the IR and replacing it with I. And we know that past participles of RE verbs, regular RE verbs, are formed by removing the RE and replacing it with U. We know there are lots of irregular past participles. Here are just a few. J'ai eu, j'ai fait, j'ai inscrit, j'ai mis. We know that some verbs, mainly those associated with movement, form the passé composé by using the present tense of the verb être, followed by the past participle. These are intransitive verbs and they do not have a direct object. Here they are: partir, arriver, retourner, mourir, entrer, naître, descendre, venir, also revenir and devenir, tomber, rester, aller, monter, sortir. Of course, this is Power and 5 trams, but you may know it as Dr. and Mrs. Van der Tramp or house verbs. Most of these, their past participles are as we would expect, but these three are a little bit different. Mourir is mort, naître, né, venir, venu. So they are the irregular ones. The other ones look pretty much as we would expect. Present tense reflexive verbs, we know that in English we say something like I wash myself, but in French we need to use a reflexive pronoun. For example, je me lave. The pronoun comes before the verb except in the affirmative imperative. In English, we can omit the pronoun, but we can never do this in French. We have to always include the reflexive pronoun. For example, je me lave, tu te laves, il, elle, on se lave, nous nous lavons, vous vous lavez, il, elle se lave. So they are our reflexive pronouns. These are just some of the reflexive verbs that you might have seen. They're often to do with our daily routine, and these are the ones where we're doing the action back to ourselves. In French, we use reflexive verbs a lot more than in English. We might say in English, I wash my hands. In French, it would be je me lave les mains, il se lave les cheveux, nous nous brossons les dents. The reflexive pronoun shows who is doing the action, so we just need a definite article. What happens in the passé composé? Well, it's formed the same way as with the avoir and the être verbs in that we conjugate être and we add the past participle. So we have an auxiliary, number one, and number two, we have a past participle. And here's a past participle of se laver. It, of course, is laver. So because this verb is a regular ER verb, it's following the same rules as we would expect. So je me lave in the present tense would become je me suis lavé. We need to keep the reflexive pronoun to match the je, to match the subject. We need to conjugate être, and then we need to add the past participle. And I'll talk about the agreement later. Tu te laves becomes tu t'es lavé. So we're conjugating the être, we're keeping the reflexive pronoun and making sure that it matches our subject. Il, elle, on se lave. Il s'est lavé. Il s'est lavé. We're keeping our reflexive pronoun, we're conjugating être to match il, and we're adding our past participle. Nous nous lavons will become nous nous sommes lavés. So we keep our reflexive pronoun, we conjugate être to match the nous, and we add our past participle. Vous vous lavez. Vous, we keep our reflexive pronoun, we conjugate être to match the vous, and we add our past participle. And il et elle se lavent becomes ils se sont lavés. And elles se sont lavées, of course. So we make sure that our reflexive pronoun matches our subject, and we make sure that être is conjugated to match our subject as well, and then we add the past participle. And of course, we have some potential agreements here. If we're feminine, we're going to add an E. If we're plural, we add an S. And if we're plural, we add an S down here. We might also have an irregular past participle. For example, s'inscrire, the past participle is inscrit. So it would become je me suis inscrit. Tu t'es inscrit. Il s'est inscrit. Nous nous sommes inscrits. Vous vous êtes inscrits. Ils se sont inscrits. So in the same way, we've got our subjects here. We have our reflexive pronouns matching our subjects. We have conjugated être to match our subjects, and we've added the past participle, which is an irregular past participle, inscrit. And of course, if it's feminine, we will add an E, and if it's plural, we add an S, assuming that it is that there is an agreement to be had there. So let's talk about agreements. Verbs that take avoir in the passé composé, that is a great majority of verbs, if they have a preceding direct object, then there will be an agreement. For example, j'ai vendu la maison. La maison is the direct object. I sold the house. It's the direct object. It's the thing being verbed. It's the thing that was sold. If it's in pronoun form, then it will precede the verb. So if we're going to say I sold it, we'd replace la maison with la, and it would come before the verb, je l'ai vendu. It's now preceding direct object pronoun. So now it's coming before the verb, therefore there is a rule in French that says it will agree. And because it's feminine, we know that it was la maison, it's an A. And because it's la, we can't have the two vowels together, so we have to have the apostrophe. Nous avons lavé nos chemises. We washed our shirts. We're going to replace this with les. We washed them. Nous les avons lavés. This is now a pronoun. We know that pronouns come before the verb. The verb in any compound tense, including passé composé, the verb is the conjugated verb, so it's the auxiliary. In this case, avant. This is just the past participle. It's only part of a verb. It's not the verb. So we know that the pronoun must come before the verb, must come before the avoir, the auxiliary here. Nous les avons lavés. And because it's preceding, we have the rule, preceding direct objects must agree. So the past participle agrees with the preceding direct object. Oops. So there we have an E for feminine and an S for plural. When we have verbs that take être, the past participle must agree with the subject, just like an adjective. So we add an E for feminine and an S for plural. Remember when we're adding when we have adjectives, when adding adjectives. Je suis petit, tu es petit, il est intelligent, elle est grande, nous sommes contents, vous êtes jolis, ils sont méchants. So just like an adjective, if it's feminine, we add an E. If it's plural, we add S. If it's feminine and plural, we add ES. In the same way, when we have a past participle with a verb that takes être, they agree with the subject in the same way. Je suis arrivé, tu es descendu, il est tombé, elle est venue, nous sommes entrés, vous êtes allés, ils sont montés. So here again, it will agree. If I'm a girl, it will agree and it will have an A. Elle est venue, it has an E because the subject is feminine. Ils sont montés, it has an S because the subject is plural. So with avoir, the verbs agree with the preceding direct object, and with être verbs, the primary and five triums, the agreement is with the subject. What happens then with reflexive verbs? Well, we know it was a bit like the house verbs in that it had être as its auxiliary, but the agreement is like the avoir verbs. It agrees with the preceding direct object. If the reflexive pronoun is a direct object, that is the thing being verbed, it will agree. For example, elle s'est lavée. She washed herself. So herself was the thing being verbed. It was the thing being washed. It's the direct object. So that reflexive pronoun is the direct object, so it agrees. Nous nous sommes réveillés. We woke ourselves up. So the reflexive pronoun is a direct object. It's a thing being woken up, so there's an agreement. Ils se sont habillés. There's a plural. There's an S here for a plural. Ils se sont habillés. It's agreeing here. They dress themselves. Themselves are the direct object. They're the things being verbed. They're the things being dressed. So there is an agreement. However, if it's not the direct object, it doesn't agree. For example, elle s'est cassé la jambe. La jambe is the direct object. She broke her leg. Now we say in English, she broke her leg. In French, they say she broke the leg to herself. So this, the leg, this is the direct object. This is the thing being verbed. This is the thing being broken. This is to herself. It's an indirect object. And we know that there is an agreement with direct objects if they're preceding the verb, but not with indirect objects. Our direct object is here. It's not preceding. It's not coming before the verb. Therefore, there's no agreement. You'll see there are a lot of examples like this when we talk about body parts. She broke her leg. He brushed his teeth. She brushed her hair, and so on. Elles se sont brossées les dents. Les dents are the direct object. The teeth are the things being verbed, the things being brushed. They're the direct object. They're not coming before the verb, so there is no agreement. Nous nous sommes foulés les chevilles. Les chevilles are the direct object, so the ankles are things being twisted. This is to ourselves. This is an indirect object. So there is no preceding direct object, therefore there is no agreement. So let's sum up. Step 1. With reflexive verbs in the passé composé, we conjugate être to match the subject. For example, je suis, tu es, il est, nous sommes, vous êtes, ils sont. Step 2. We add the past participle following the same rules. For example, laver becomes lavé. Remember, I'm not sure what that's there for. Remember, make sure you have the correct reflexive pronoun to match the subject. For example, je me, tu te. And remember, the past participle will agree if there is a preceding direct object. So that's le passé composé with reflexive verbs.